Hello, you're listening to Lists and Other Things That No One Asked For with Jesse Barbin, your weekly mini podcast where stuff usually takes the form of a list about pop culture, music, growing up, so I hope you like it. A common icebreaker question is, if you could have lunch with anyone living or dead, who would it be? I've never really cared for icebreaker questions, especially questions like this. I think it's a decent question, but when it comes up, I always choke and I can't think of anyone cool. So I'll say like Abraham Lincoln or something stupid. I was giving it some thought lately, and here's who I came up with. I went with artists generally, no lame people like philosophers, leaders, or politicians. Boo. Just the cool people that people actually like to talk to. So in the category of comedian, I picked Mitch Hedberg. And status of living or dead, unfortunately, he's dead, and the world is poorer for it. When I first heard about Mitch Hedberg, I had already been interested in stand-up for a while. I had gained consciousness in the later part of the 80s, where Bill Cosby was everywhere, and I know he's a bad guy now. I didn't know back then, but my parents had a bunch of his comedy albums, and that was the first time I had heard the art form of stand-up comedy, and it was transformative. But then around 2001, I randomly caught Mitch Hedberg on TV on a Saturday afternoon or something. I think it was a Just for Laughs performance, and it blew my mind. It's hard to understate how much my mind was blown in the course of like my future was changed. But anyway, his one-liners and how he could turn a good joke into a great joke with just his pronunciation, emphasizing different syllables. He seemed like a mad genius, and this caused me to get more into stand-up, which solidified for me the fact that Mitch was doing something other people couldn't. Because as I saw more comedians, I saw how unique Mitch was. I inhaled those first two CDs, Strategic Grill Locations, and Mitch all together. I inhaled those, and it was a religious experience. And even when they released that posthumous Work in Progress album, Do You Believe in Gosh, I just lapped it up and listened to it. I still listen to them now. They do make me a little sad, but they're just a masterclass in that type of joke writing. That's not my strength, but I do take some of the pronunciation stuff from him. And you hear some of my early stand-up. You can find it on YouTube. It's very much me telling stories and stuff, but with Mitch Hedberg elocution. I remember I found out that Mitch died in a post by the Minneapolis band Motion City Soundtrack. They're one of my favorite bands, so it was a weird confluence of my interests. That he died and so young was obviously tragic, and I took it hard. And if I think about it too hard anymore, I still get sad. If I had lunch with Mitch, we would have sandwiches, of course. And if you don't know why, you should. I'll make a playlist for you of Mitch Hedberg jokes. In the category of musician or guitarist, I picked Andy Summers of The Police. His status as living or dead, well, he's living. I like Andy Summers because he seems like the unsung hero of The Police. One of my favorite bands. He seems like the middle child of The Police. Obviously, Sting has the smug confidence of an oldest child, where Stuart Copeland has the brash, attention-seeking behavior of a youngest child. Andy seemed to be the one keeping it all together. Sting wrote surface-level literary and psychology references. Stuart Copeland had the flashy drums, but Andy Summers is where the Police come together. This is a big part of why Sting's solo stuff has always felt a little dull to me. His guitar and the textures and the chords he plays were really unique to him, and that made the Police stand out that much more. He also seems like a very chill dude, even though he was part of one of the biggest bands on the planet. If you watch any of his interviews, he seems like so down to earth. It's crazy. If I had lunch with Andy, we'd have tea. Like tea in the Sahara. I don't know. I think that's what British people like. Is tea, right? In the category of filmmakers is Jared and Jerusha Hess. And his status as living or dead is living. I had just started college in 2004 when I read about Napoleon Dynamite in an entertainment magazine. How very 2004. I made a point to go see it. This movie checked a ton of boxes for me. I was living in Idaho for one. I also grew up as an awkward teen, surrounded by a lot of other awkward teens, so Napoleon Dynamite spoke directly to my soul. I would put it in my top 5 movies easy. I think it's cool that Jared and Jerusha Hess are a husband and wife team and that they have such a unique perspective. Nobody makes movies like them. I think it's a shame that some of their movies have kind of floundered and have not been understood by critics or audiences. It's been a little bit painful to watch them kind of struggle to find where they fit in a post-Napoleon world, but they've stuck to their guns and they're still kicking around 20 years later, and I have nothing but respect for them, and they have big projects coming up, so I think they're doing just fine. If I was having lunch with Jared and Jerusha Hess, we would have, and you should have seen this answer coming from a mile away, tater tots. Next, in the category of author is Kurt Vonnegut. Status of living or dead, unfortunately dead. He died when I was in college, and it was another one that I took kind of hard. I mentioned before that I was kind of a sad kid with an unhealthy attachment to his high school English teacher, and that she was the one who recommended Slaughterhouse-Five and Kurt Vonnegut to me after hearing that I liked Catch-22 and Joseph Heller. I thought he was really good back then. I thought Slaughterhouse-Five was just amazing, but every time I reread it, it gets better. The premise of a person becoming unstuck in time and experience the story out of order was ingenious, and not only a good narrative device, but it also makes everything funnier. That was the first book that interested me in Vonnegut, but the book that made me stick around and become a Vonnegut fan ultimately was God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. It's about a person who was born into money, but wants to give the money away because he sees the starry state of the world, and the distress it causes his rich father and all the establishment people who have money is hilarious to watch. It basically asks the question, why don't we care about poor people, and why is it so bad to want to try and take care of poor people? If Kurt and I were having lunch, we'd have a Three Musketeers bar. And lastly, in the category of actor, and that's not a perfect description, but we'll get to that in a minute. In the category of actor, I put Miranda Hart. Status as living or dead, obviously is living. Miranda Hart is an actor creator. She wrote her own series, Miranda. In this series, she writes herself as the butt of many of the jokes, but she's alternately vulnerable and dignified on screen. She gives this dignity to other characters you'll see her portray. She has a gift for physical comedy, as well as funny turns of phrase, and she's the best at breaking the fourth wall. If you've seen Fleabag, it's essentially a sadder, dirtier version of Miranda. I think critics weren't necessarily super stoked about Miranda, but she weathered the criticism, and I think the show is a classic status. Packed to the gills with jokes, it's comfort TV of the highest quality, and it holds up over repeated watches, and you can't say that about a lot of shows. I'm always looking forward to seeing Miranda Hart pop up in something new and reading whatever she writes, because she's writing books. If Miranda and I had lunch, I think we'd have novelty chocolate. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. If you prefer reading, there's a Substack. You can talk to me on any social medias at Jesse Barbin. Have a good week. If I was having lunch with Jared and Jerusha Hess, that is a mouthful. Blah, blah, blah.